God.
So I'm sure by now most people know that Israel and Iran are at war. But the latest breaking news is actually Iran's parliament approving the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, right? So what's the Strait of Hormuz and what's the economic implications if they close down the Strait of Hormuz, right? So at this current point in time, Iran's parliament has approved it, but it goes up to the Security Council, right, which is the last level. And if they approve it, this Strait of Hormuz, they basically will close it down, right? And what is the Strait of Hormuz? So the Strait of Hormuz is a very narrow waterway which connects countries to the sea, right? So you can see that very, very big oil producers in the Middle East, right? Saudi Arabia, Oman borders it also, Pakistan, Iran, and all this Iraq, right? So all these are really, really big oil producing countries. But you can see Saudi Arabia actually has another path here. So I'm not sure whether how functional this path is. But I think if there is war going on here, they might decide to use this path, right? So that's something else we will need to see, right? But when we take a look, right, actually during the war and during the bombing of these nuclear facilities, there have been no major disruptions to the global oil supply, right? But when you take a look at the price, obviously there has been price movement, right? This is the market trying to price in maybe some closure of the Strait of Hormuz or a reduction in oil production because all these wars are happening, right? So when we look at how much oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz, it's actually a very, very large number, right? It's 20 million barrels of oil, right? This is roughly 1/5 of all daily global production, right? And who is this oil being supplied to? Actually, it's supplied to, I think, 3 major countries like India, Russia, and also China, right? So I think Iran actually has very little to gain by actually closing the Strait of Hormuz, right? Because I think about 3% of the oil goes to the US, so they're not really hurting the US that much. But I think during war times, people are not necessarily rational, right? Because these are maybe some of the moves that they can pull for some strategic game that they're playing that we don't know about, right? So if you take a look at a prominent advisor to Iran's supreme leader actually has called for the closure of the strait, right? And a closure of the strait would mean this oil prices can go up pretty high, right? Maybe 90, maybe 100. Some projections have been saying like 150 to 200. But anytime we have some war somewhere, that's what people are calling for, right? 200 oil or 300 oil. Right? So will that happen? If that happens, the global economy will absolutely be in the toilet, right? But when we take a look at the markets, actually the markets have not really reflected this, right? Because you can see actually when this war really started happening about 2 weeks ago, up to now, the markets have basically been flat. So this is the period for the war. So it's down like 1-2%, nothing too significant, right? And this is essentially the market saying it's not too concerned about this, right? So only time will tell whether that's the right conclusion for them to draw or not. But I do think this is something that we really need to keep an eye out on, right? Because 20% of the global supply is no joke, right? And who are they supplying all this to? It's actually mostly China, right? So China and Russia are key allies of Iran because of all this oil trading and stuff like that, right? But I think the heaviest hit will be Asian economies. The first one being China, the second and third one I think being South Korea and also Japan, right? Because South Korea and Japan actually doesn't produce any of their own oil, right? Basically, and the third one, China, they produce oil, but they consume way more than they produce, right? So if you talk about US, they are basically not really entangled in this situation. But if global oil prices move, obviously it'll be bad for the US economy as well, right? So next, I want to talk about whether they can actually enforce this, right? This closure of the Strait of Hormuz, right? Because you can see surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, actually there's a lot of US allies, right? And also China allies, right? You see Pakistan actually is a China ally. This Saudi Arabia is a US ally. UAE is a US ally. So we can see that a lot of the surrounding countries are actually allies to the US, right? And you can talk about like Israel, and also Syria is also now a US ally. So Turkey is like quite in the middle. Don't really know what's going on with Turkey. But my point being, right, you can actually say that we're going to close the Strait of Hormuz. But when it comes to country versus country, can you actually enforce it, right? So if you cut off China's supply to oil, maybe they decide, oh, we're not friends anymore. I'm going to send a Navy tanker. Or you cut this off and the oil prices move a lot. Then US decides, oh, we're going to send like some Navy vessels here. So does Iran have the capabilities to enforce this, because we have to remember that when a police car pulls up somewhere, wherever a crime scene, so on the car it says law enforcement. And the second part is very important, right? Enforcement, right? Because enforcement is the part where can you enforce the thing? Because if you have laws but you cannot enforce it, the laws are as good as worthless, right? So yeah, it's not as simple as we sign this into parliament and then the National Security Council signs it into law, then yeah, we can just close the Strait of Hormuz, right? Because you have to ask yourself, and then what, right? Because other parties that have vested interest will also react, right? Who's to say Saudi Arabia won't allow US assets into their waters, and who would to say Kuwait won't allow US assets into their waters, and this UAE also, right? So these are all things that we have to think about, right? And potentially this is why the markets have not reacted so heavily as to like drop like 10, 20, 30%, right? Because they are maybe guessing out that Iran, even if they order this, it's a sensationalist headline and they cannot enforce it, right? But yeah, overall pretty terrible what's happening in the Middle East right now. I think everyone's hoping for a negotiated solution, right? Because I think if we don't have a negotiated solution, we're moving further and further into like more forever wars, right? Because if we take a look at Israel and also Gaza, they said they will wrap that up like really quickly, right? And it's already been 2 years and it's still ongoing, right? And look at Ukraine, Russia, they said, oh, Russia thought they were gonna roll in and just like conquer Ukraine in like 2 weeks, and now it's been like 3 years, right? So I think there's a lot of loss of life and human suffering regarding all this, and I think the negotiated solution will be the best outcome for everyone, right? But in terms of just looking at it from an economic point of view, I think this is an incredibly important news that you might want to pay attention to, right? And see how the situation evolves, right? So yeah, that's about all I wanted to share today. If you did enjoy the video, do help me smash up the like button, hit subscribe, and also hit the bell button. With that being said, have a fantastic day ahead, and peace out.